Hey, it is Sarah. So it's super, super, super late at night. It's like, okay, it's not super late at night, but for me, it feels really late. It's like, oh my gosh, it's 10:45. Um, I'm making a video because while everything is still fresh in my mind and while I'm awake and it's actually quiet, I figured I might as well do this. So the title of this hangout is called Strengthsfinder Class Strategies. Let's see here. Game Plan. So here's what I'm currently taking. It's called Game Plan, Winning Strategies for a Significant Life. We're learning to clarify our values, live intentionally, leverage our strengths, and influence others. And it's really fascinating. I don't know if you've ever taken the Strengthsfinder test. Um, I took the test. I took the test at the beginning of this year. I've done the Danny Johnson GEMS course, which was the absolute best. I don't want to call it a personality test, but it was like the absolute best thing I'd found. It went into, there's 4 different personality types, and it showed you not only what yours was, but how you could identify other people's. And it just gave me a really open-minded appreciation for other people's strengths and other people's main areas of like how they act. And so that was really great. And I think it went into really good depth about how you can interact with other people and communicate with them, work with them. Yeah, so that's where that one really thrived. And this book, the StrengthsFinder book, goes into what your own individual strengths are. So in the book, you receive a code where you can go take this quiz online. And it's a really, really in-depth thing. And then there's like 34, I think, or roughly like 34 strengths that it puts in this book. And so the strengths in the book are just generic strengths. But after you take the quiz online, every book comes with an activation code that you have to tear off and put in there. It gives you an individualized printout of how your strengths coincide with, so how like one strength coincides with your other 4 strengths, because you all have, it's measuring your top 5 strengths. And so it's really fascinating. And so from the GEMS, with Danny Johnson's GEMS, I'm able to see like where my strengths come into play with what my GEMS are. And my GEMS were pretty evenly split between Ruby and Sapphire, like almost totally even. And so it was actually really interesting because my top 5 strengths, which up until a few years ago, I'd been like a really repressed version of myself. Like legitimately, when I was younger, I had this experience way, way back I was young, like grade school, where this one girl liked a boy and he liked me, and so she wanted him to like her, so she paid everybody a quarter for people to stop talking to me, and it was like really terrible. It was me and another girl that nobody else would talk to, and so I didn't want to come out of my locker one day. I was like, I just quit. And I think I was in like 1st or 2nd grade. So it was, and that kind of, I realized like up to 2 years ago, that just really forever, it just like scarred me. And yeah, so that was crazy. So my top 5 strengths, my number 1 came out as command. My 2nd is activation. My 3rd is input. My 4th is futuristic. And my 5th one is learner. Yeah, command was really shocking because I don't know how many people there were there. There were probably, so every single person like took a sticker and they went up and every single strength was written on the board, and I was the only one that wound up with command out of like 300 strengths. I was like, oh, that's crazy, because a couple of years ago, I would have never pinned myself as command. I was kind of like shyer and not living my best version. Anyways, so today what we learned was our strengths. So in here is the binder. Like at the beginning of the year, when I took this quiz, it didn't tell us anything. It was just like, oh, these are your strengths. And it was just kind of like, cool, that's nice. But this coaching class really talks about like how to identify your strengths. And then there's 4 domains of strengths. So for example, all of my strengths are underneath of influencing and thinking. I have no relational or executing skills. So that's when you surround yourself with people who have those kind of strengths. So that's what I'm looking for on my team is like executing people who are the middlemen who like, they're like the meat and potatoes. They get the stuff done. Because me, I'm just like, that's not my strength. I don't thrive in the executing part of it. And then so this week we learned also like about our shadow side. So for example, some of my shadow traits are I can come off as overly opinionated, bossy, harsh, and especially when I was married, I realized, oh my gosh, command. That's why I had so many problems in marriage because I don't take easily to listening. And he and I had been we still are very strong-willed. And we took the gems thing, and this was funny. Like, so I learned this past week, like with the whole command being one of my number one strengths. So my gem was a sapphire ruby, very evenly split ruby sapphire. I had the same amount of points, and his gems were ruby or emerald and ruby, which were the exact opposites of mine. So emerald and sapphire are opposite, and then the two rubies just were like this. So we were like this on so many levels. So then I also realized with being command, like I like doing things my way, and it was just like, oh my gosh. So anyways, it was really interesting. So this week we found out how our strengths related to our values, and your values help you determine your priorities. And this was just really cool. It's so super in-depth, and they did such a great job with this. If you're local, I highly recommend seeking them out or getting in on the next class, because this should be like at least $150 class, like seriously. And I paid $15 for the course, and I'm just like, what? This is insane. We get all this material and the book. So for example, we find out what our values are. And so when you find out what your values are, like my values are faith, independence, or purpose, which goes along with faith, independence, and legacy are mine. And it also says in here, like, you get to prioritize your values, figure out what you value. It helps you to figure out where to invest your time and stay focused in life, because when you operate in your strengths, then it's kind of like where you're the happiest and where you're thriving. And so I guess what I learned was that I don't have any relational strengths at all, like not at all. It just makes so much perfect sense. Like, it makes sense why if I'm by myself or I'm just like in a hole, I would be fine. And I'm not weird. That's just how I was made. Doesn't mean that I don't love people or I don't love my family. It just means that I show it differently. So yeah, it was really cool. It was just really interesting. So I'm excited to see this week's assignments are to find out where we see our strengths and to really like kind of identify our values. And our homework. Oh, and it also shows, one of the questions was, you can figure out where you've received the most hurts from when you identify one of your values that boundary has been crossed or stepped on. And for example, one of my values is purpose and independence. So when my independence gets taken away, or when my freedom gets taken away, or when somebody kind of inherently crosses that and tries to be like controlling or whatever, nobody puts baby in a corner. I can't be put in a box. Like, you can't just like try to keep me in one spot, because that just squashes my spirit. And I was like, whoa, that's so true. It's super true. So I should probably go to bed. But anyways, I was just really excited. Like, super duper, super excited. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was reading this. I'm like, yeah, and I'm off in La La Land. So this is just really helping me identify where navigating. And I just, even in the next year, I just really, 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 really want to start living in the best version of me, which is my whole point for having the word bloom for the year 2016. And I feel like identifying my strengths is helping me bloom. So, yeah. Alrighty, anyways, I'm gonna go to bed. I feel like I've just rambled and provided you with absolutely nothing that was useless. Use useful. It's bedtime. It's terrible. Good night.